Welcome to the Healthcare Triage podcast. It's a whole new year, 2018, and we're still gonna keep churning them out every other week. It's been an interesting end of 2017. Let's talk about it briefly. First of all, CHIP. Still not authorized. It's unbelievable. Funding ran out on September 30th. You would think with something so popular, so bipartisan, Congress could get its act together, but it can't. We ended the year and there was still no vote to reauthorize CHIP. I guess the good news is they did come up with some money as part of the short stopgap funding bill at the end of the year to keep states going, something like $2.8, $2.7 billion, which is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm thrilled that we're not kicking kids off health insurance yet, but it's still not enough. It might get most states to March, maybe sooner. It's no way to run a country. It's no way to run a healthcare system. Insurance is supposed to provide you financial security in the long term, not for the next month or two. And unfortunately, that's all we seem to get. Now, of course, that funding bill runs out on, I think, January 19th, which means Congress again needs to pass a budget. It seems unlikely. I mean, maybe they can keep passing these short stopgap funding bills every couple weeks forever. But again, no way to run a government. So hopefully they'll figure this out soon. I'm not optimistic. But anyway, that's not the only thing that happened at the end of 2017. They passed that whole tax bill, and embedded within that, they got rid of the individual mandate. Finally! Don't you feel the freedom? Can't you feel it? Well, if you can't, that's partially because the individual mandate really doesn't go away until 2019. So if you were planning on going uninsured in 2018, you're still going to have to pay that tax penalty. So keep being insured. Now in 2019, as long as nothing changes, and certainly something could because there's another election at the end of this year, then in 2019, you don't have to buy insurance. You could choose to go uninsured and not pay a penalty. I don't understand why people do that. I just don't. I mean, even if you're healthy, you could still be at risk for something catastrophic happening. Remember that insurance isn't just about health. It's also about financial security. And even getting a cheap policy provides you with knowledge that you're not likely going to go bankrupt if something bad happened to you, even something like an accident or cancer. So I still recommend you get insurance. Having said that, you won't have to, unless, again, something changes. Of course, getting rid of the individual mandate could potentially be problematic for everybody else who wants to be insured because it leads to that death spiral that we always talk about. Here's how it works for those of you who don't remember. Healthy people choose not to buy insurance because they don't have to. Therefore, only sick people are left in the risk pool. They raise the price of insurance for everybody. That leads even more healthy people to say, well, I don't want to pay that much. They leave the risk pool. That leaves an even sicker population. They raise the price even again. And then people go, well, I don't want to buy insurance now that it costs even more than it did before. So they don't buy insurance. Sicker people left. They raise the price again, and it goes round and round and round until nobody wants to buy insurance unless they're truly sick. It costs a small fortune, which means that lots of people are priced out of the market. That's the death spiral. Having said that, we don't really know what's going to happen. Theoretically, it should, but it turns out that lots of people buy insurance even without mandates. They buy it even without advertisements and a lot of other things. Because one of the other things we talked about a lot in 2017 was the Trump administration's lack of excitement about trying to get you to buy insurance. They slashed the advertising budget for the exchanges. They cut the number of navigators. They shut down the system online every Sunday for maintenance, which was a little bit suspicious. But even with all of that, something like 8.8 million people still signed up for insurance, which is like 95% of the number of people that signed up the year before. So even without all those inducements, lots of people bought insurance, and many people still might because there are still state exchanges open, and we won't have the final numbers for a few months, but it didn't turn out as bleak as a lot of people thought, including me, which makes you have to wonder whether my pronouncements even about the individual mandate and how things will be so bleak might be a little overblown. Because guess what? We don't understand people as well as we think. Us that look at the models, we look at the things in the past, we look at the research, we try to project what people are going to do with all of these different decisions and all of these different policies we put in place, and sometimes we don't get it right. So this is going to be a test. Let's see what happens potentially without the individual mandate. Let's see what happens as we did without all the budgeting and everything else. Maybe everyone will still buy insurance, or maybe the Democrats will get elected in a wave election in 2018, change everything again, and I'll be back here in 2019 telling you nothing's the same as it was before. Who knows? Anyway, that's a quick recap at the end of 2017. We're going to launch into 2018 in the next few weeks. So our guest this week is John Green, who really needs no introductions. I'm not going to bother listing off his bona fides or what he's done, because if you don't know, I can't believe you're listening to this podcast anyway. But John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So we were going to talk about mental health, and I think we probably still will, but I sort of feel bad because I feel like you've had that interview about 80 times probably in the last few months.
Yeah, I don't mind, though. I mean, I understood when I was writing a book. For those who don't know, I wrote a novel recently called Turtles All the Way Down that is about a girl who has OCD, which I also have. And I understood when I published the book under my own name that I was going to be talking about it a lot. And it's important to talk about, I think, because people, it's still something that people feel a lot of shame about, and that there is still a lot of stigma around. I think, especially in people's professional lives. Like, I'm super privileged in the sense that I can't get fired because of my OCD, and it can be an issue in my professional life, but only because it's an issue in my professional life, not like because, of the stigma associated with it, the ways that it can impact your professional development. So I still think there's a ton of stigma around it.
So I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to turn this over to me.
Okay.
Because I think I tweeted this yesterday, and it's funny because when I tweet about it, I feel like half the people that follow me take it seriously and the other half sort of blow it off. But I've never really felt like I suffer from mental health in a debilitating way that prevents me from sort of doing my job or sort of getting through. My mental health issues, I almost feel are like subclinical, where anxiety and I don't even want to say depression because I don't feel like it makes it to full-on depression, but my depressive symptoms or feelings start to overwhelm me and I just don't want to do anything. And I can muddle through it the vast majority of the time, but I came back from break and I swear to God, I went to work yesterday and it was like walking through mud, and I'm still feeling it, where I jokingly keep telling people like I feel like depression is just over there. I can hear it. I know it's out there. It's like knocking at the door. It's not there yet, but I don't want to do it. All I want to do is go home, get into bed. I want to go home, play some video games with my kids and do nothing. And yet I can't. Like, I have to go to work. I have to still be a dad. I have to still be a husband. I got to get through this. And I don't know. We have no mechanism in society for dealing with that.
Right. Well, it's weird because everything's a continuum, right? Like, so when we talk about mental health disorders, we have to apply all these diagnostic criteria to it because for insurance reasons and for other reasons, and things have to fit into boxes. But of course, things don't always fit into boxes, and there's a lot. What is the word? Comorbidity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, I think, in mental health problems. For instance, like OCD used to be an anxiety disorder and now it's not, but like the way that I experience what I'm told is OCD, it involves a lot of anxiety, a lot of dread, a lot of fear, a lot of worry. But it is also on a continuum. Like, I recognize that in a lot of ways I'm lucky because it, while it takes over my life sometimes and while at times it is disabling, most of the time in the last 10 or 15 years, it hasn't been. And I've been able to sort of build a life around it that includes it. But there are those days, one of the benefits of my job is when I have those days when I want to crawl in bed, I can. One of the downsides of my job is also that when I have those days I want to crawl into bed, I can.
Yeah. Because it's not like I'm not doing the things I'm supposed to do. Like, I'll go to therapy tomorrow and I'm honest about it, and I will talk to Amy and I will mention it, even in public. And it's not that I'm trying to, but it's still like, I don't want to get out of it.
Yeah, and it's for me at least, it's like a complete trap in the sense that I know that I'll feel better if I exercise regularly. I know that I'll feel better if I take my medication. But when I'm sick, it's harder to do those things. I've had a bad period of mental health as well. I think partly coming out of all the stress of the book, and partly just because it happens, like it waxes and wanes for me. And I know that if I can just like go and exercise, then that's 30 minutes that I won't spend worrying about whether or not I'm dying. But it becomes so much harder to actually do it.
There are days when I feel like I don't want to, you never want to say like, well, it's even worse than if you were like truly debilitating. But like when I'm having an ulcerative colitis flare, I can just sort of put down a flag, declare to the world, like, I'm tapping out. and I'm done.
Right.
But when it's the everyday grind of like, I'm just going to, work through this chronic problem and just, man up and just keep going.
Right.
That's almost like harder to do in some ways because
Yeah.
I can talk about it. I can make people try to understand that I don't want to say suffering, but that I'm trying to muddle through, but there's no peace. There's no stopping it or getting off that train. Why is it, do you think how do we change that? Like, how do we make it so that it's better for the people trying to deal with it every day?
Well, I think we deal with this in all kinds of chronic health problems. I think we're really bad at dealing with chronic health problems. Even something that, ulcerative colitis for some people is an everyday for decades thing that they have to deal with, rather than, like for you or for my brother, it's an issue of flares. But I think for people who deal with psychic pain every single day and have been dealing with it every day for years, or for people who deal with physical pain every day for years, I think we're bad at finding ways to talk about that because it doesn't fit our narrative expectations of illness, which is that illness is something that you treat and then you get better.
Right.
We want people, and we see that all the time in the way that we talk about the healthcare delivery system, right? Like, we want our healthcare system to take sick people and make them better, and then it's over. But the truth about healthcare is that in a lot of cases, it's more about long-term solutions to long-term problems than it is about a 7-day course of antibiotics. Like, there's a lot, not just with mental health, there's a lot of preventative health, a lot of lifelong health things that require long-term, consistent, careful solutions, which we are really bad at. Like, not just when it comes to healthcare, by the way. Like, we're bad at long-term solutions for long-term problems when it comes to climate change. We're bad at long-term solutions for long-term problems when it comes to global healthcare delivery, right? Like, when Ebola is, when there's an Ebola outbreak in Sierra Leone and Liberia and Guinea, suddenly there's a lot of resources pouring into those countries to help them with their healthcare systems. That outbreak ends and you can almost hear the sound of the money leaving. And we're just... But what would really make a difference in those countries is a long-term intervention. So I think we're just generally bad at long-term solutions.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And even when you're talking about it, it makes sense even what I think I was trying to get at before, where it's like, if there's a true mental health depressive crisis, I feel like I can make something happen.
Right.
It's just when it's the everyday background that it's much harder. And again, it's like part of it I own is my own problem as well, because, even when I was complaining yesterday, multiple people said to me, well, why don't you just not come in today? Why don't you take the day off? And I wouldn't. Like, the idea of canceling all my appointments and not showing up and getting a day behind on work, I wasn't willing to do it. And it's funny because I would have done it if it was a physical problem in a second.
Right.
But I won't do it if it's and it's like, and I'm embedded in this stuff, and it still amazes me that I refuse to sort of make the same allowances for mental health as I would for physical health.
Yeah, I mean, and we create this dichotomy where one doesn't really exist. Like, it is true that mental health problems are different from physical health problems, but again, there's a lot of interaction between the two. Mental health problems have physical manifestations, and physical health problems have big implications for one's mental health. I mean, there's I think we have to find ways to be nicer to each other, but we also have to find ways to kind of regulate being nice to ourselves and nice to each other, so that you actually aren't punished for taking time off work, which most people functionally are, whether it's acknowledged or not, or at least people worry about being punished for it, or they worry about not progressing as quickly at their jobs if they have a balance between their work and their life. But the point of life is not to maximize the number of resources that you acquire. Like, that's just, maybe that's the evolutionary point, but that's not the point. And even if you play that game, even if you play that game in the short run, a lot of times in the long run, you end up hurting yourself. So,
do you feel like what's going on in the world is affecting people's mental health, or is it we're just complaining more and we're focusing? I
do. I mean, there have been a couple of small studies that don't pass the healthcare triage sniff test for sure. But I do think that there is growing evidence, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but I think there's growing evidence that the way we are currently using the social internet is causing some problems for if not everyone, at least some of the people, you go into the feed, you passively scroll, you find yourself getting angry and outraged. You then share some of that anger and outrage, and the algorithm thinks like, oh, I did my job. I made this person stay on this website as long as possible, and I made them share information, which the algorithm has been told is the point of the website. But from our perspective, from a human perspective, the point of the website ought to be, are you better informed? Are you happier? Do you feel more closely connected to people in your community? And do you feel more united with your community and more conscious of other people's concerns and considerations? And I think the social internet's really bad at that. And I do think that's having health effects. I know it's having, well, let me phrase that differently. I think it's definitely had a negative impact on my own health.
It's interesting because I find that social media isn't doing it to me, but the news is. Like I cannot listen to the news on the radio. I cannot watch cable news. It just feels like it's a constant way of trying to anger me. And that feels new to me. And I don't know why, because 24-hour news has been around for a while, but I'm amazed at people that are always complaining to me like, well, did you hear this? Did you hear this? Everything is so much worse than it used to be. And I'm like, well, you just never heard that before. It was always happening. You just didn't know. Right.
No, it's really deeply true that everything is not worse than it used to be, but it also very much feels that way. To me, that's a social internet problem, but you're right. It's also a cable news problem. It's a broader cultural problem. And like, and it's an interesting one too, right? Because you can say over and over again, hey, actually, crime is down, way down.
Right.
And actually, this is better and that is better. And people are living longer lives. Not currently in the United States, but people used to be living longer and longer lives before the opiate epidemic. And you can say like there are lots of ways in which life has gotten better, and these times that we're holding up as having been good times were not good times. Like the 1990 in the United States was not a great time in terms of your chances of being dying by violence, but it also was a worse time in terms of your median household income. Like, but things feel horrible right now.
Yeah, and this is where it's like I wonder if like does it always just feel horrible, and it's just like it's my turn in the barrel because perhaps the person I wanted to be in control of the government is not, or the things are moving in a different direction, or is it? Do you think that everybody sort of feels that way right now?
I asked. I'm sorry for the name dropping, but I asked Vice President Biden that when I interviewed him in Minneapolis, and he said that in his opinion it is worse. That it's worse because we aren't. What he's said, and I'm going to paraphrase him, of course, and poorly, is that we aren't listening to each other as well in terms of government, which he said. He felt like was partly about the gerrymandering of districts and the increasing polarization, even from state to state. The difference between California and South Dakota in terms of the kind of political makeup of the citizenship there is such that Republican lawmakers fear primary challenges much more than they fear general elections, and that's true for Democratic lawmakers in states like California. And so that is a polarizing force. But then I also think, I also think the internet is a polarizing force. I think it's really hard to hear voices you disagree with on the internet and hear them carefully and cautiously. And I remember, obviously everybody, I do think that's one way that things are getting worse.
That's interesting because like I have strict rules about like my Twitter feed, but it's like I will not follow more than 200 people, and I have sort of rules about how many people have to disagree with me politically that I follow, especially with respect to journalists or the people that I follow. A lot of people I think that write for a living, write news. But like I use Twitter in that way. Like I make sure I follow a fairly decent number of voices that disagree with me, usually nicely. I don't follow like flamethrowers, but it's and I even have friends here I think who disagree with me politically. And my family certainly disagrees with me politically. So I haven't felt like I'm in as much of a bubble as I think a lot of people do, but it definitely feels like there's a lot of anger and that people aren't talking to each other.
Yeah.
And that might be new.
Yeah, and I think there's also a lack of nuance in terms of this is something we've talked about in the past, Aaron, that when it comes to really complicated, difficult topics like healthcare reform, there is a lack of nuance and there is a lack of willingness to acknowledge that there are trade-offs in everything, and that for instance, in a big tax reform plan, there are going to be winners and losers, and there's an inability to acknowledge that these are difficult problems and that every solution to them will be inadequate and every solution to them will have shortcomings, and that's something that really frustrates me universally on the political spectrum, is that I don't see people saying, you know what, I think single-payer healthcare is a good idea, and I think it's the right idea for the United States today, but it will come with problems and it will not magically solve all of the existing problems. I would love to hear someone say that. And I would almost vote for them whether I agree with them or not, just because I'm grateful for the embracing of nuance.
It's amazing because, I mean, it's like, and again, not to bring it back to me, but it's like I feel like that's the piece I write pretty regularly when I do write. And I'm amazed at the responses I will get on email and in the comment section and tweets, and that it goes right past people. Either they're screaming and yelling that how dare you even we just wrote a piece, I think it was last week, on Taiwan, which shifted to a single payer system almost overnight, just not that long ago, like 20 years ago, and showing that it is possible, but trying to acknowledge the trade-offs. And every comment felt like it was either like, how dare you, don't you know, why won't you acknowledge the downsides of single payer? And the other half was like, why can't you, say that single payer would be good for America? I'm like, what? Did you read it? Like, I don't even think people read it. And these are the commenters at the New York Times. Like, I don't think they're reading the piece. And then I start to despair.
No, that's a huge problem, the reading of the headlines, not the article. But again, to me, that is a function of the scrolling feed more than it's a function of something like deep down in human nature. Like I really, this is why I'm trying to make a rule for I'm trying to make rules for myself that basically require me to read the article, because the feeling that I apparently want to have is a feeling of outrage and anger, or alternately this feeling of hope that all of my enemies will be vanquished, right? Like the two things I read the internet for right now are either like your enemies are going to die in prison,
right?
Which I think people on both sides of the political spectrum are reading right now. So there's lots of articles about how Hillary Clinton is going to go to prison. And there are lots of articles about how Donald Trump is going to go to prison. And all of the ones about Hillary are being read by people on the right. And all of the ones about Trump are being read by people on the left. And then there are the articles that are designed to anger you and make you more convinced that the person who you want to go to prison definitely deserves to.
It's so right, because and I feel like I can't cut myself off from this because partially it's my job, but then I realize some days that the vast majority of these people in this country probably have no idea any of this is going on. And they're not following it as obsessively.
But also, I think they might be better off. Like, I used to be like, oh, why people aren't well informed enough. And now I think like, maybe I'm actually not that well informed. I'm just following certain stories very, very closely. Like, if I were well informed, I would know more about maternal mortality rates, in Eritrea. Right. Being well informed is not knowing every name in the Trump-Russia scandal. Right.
Yeah.
It's just like, that's the story that I choose to follow. And I want to do a better job of following broader human stories, following stories that aren't, that don't feel as close to me necessarily.
That might be something, I'm trying to figure out this year, what's the thing that I want to work on. And so maybe that would be better.
I mean, I don't know. I'm making a podcast this year. That's my main project
podcast, though, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm making a good one.
One without Hank?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm getting Hank out of the way.
There you go. Look forward to that.
No, it's scripted. That's what I mean by good.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, so I'm going to make a scripted podcast, and that's my big goal for 2018. And other than that, just to turn down the volume a little on my life so that I can hopefully get some of my equilibrium back. I mean, one of the big challenges I have with living with my mental illness is that I desperately want to be as as productive as I want to be, and I get really and frankly, to be as productive as the people around me who I feel like are really productive, especially most notably my brother. And I get really frustrated when I'm like, okay, well, I can't do as much as Hank, and but I can't, and so I have to live within those confines. I have to be realistic about that, or else I'm gonna, spend the next however many years of my life I have left careening back and forth between overcompensating, trying to be too productive, trying to do too much, and then ending up in a real mental health crisis and then having to shut everything down. I don't want to careen back and forth between those extremes. I want to find the proverbial middle path.
If you figure that out, please let me know. Because I don't even have, I think, someone to point to. I just constantly feel not productive enough. And then when I say that out loud to people, they are horrified. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, though. I feel the same way. I feel people from the outside say like, oh, you seem very productive, but I don't feel productive. I feel like I don't get enough done. And but on the other hand, like, we are only here for a little while, and it's a bit of a waste to to spend the whole time feeling busy and not notice. For instance, the astonishing beauty of the White River. Just today, I was. It's very cold here in Indianapolis. It's the first time that the river has frozen over in the years that I've lived near it. And just today, I went down to the water, and I didn't see any animals, but I did see deer tracks that went all the way across the river, implying that I think a deer made it.
Hopefully. Let's just assume the deer
made it to the edge and then fell in. I don't know. But moments like that are so lovely, and moments with your family are so lovely. And if you don't take advantage of that stuff, it just it's never going to feel like
this
enough.
Shows you my mindset, because I'm panicking right now that the deer made it across the river. Then it's going to thaw, and forever it will now be stuck in the other side of the river.
Oh, no. Don't worry about that. When deer die, which happens all the time in our neighborhood, when deer die, they are eaten very quickly by coyotes.
Oh, sweet. Well, there you go.
No worries.
This is the time in the podcast when usually we answer a few questions. John's going to join us, as our guests always do. So, first one, do PPIs really cause dementia? PPIs, of course, are proton pump inhibitors, things like omeprazole, antacids that people often take.
Do they?
No. So this is amazing to me because I feel like I've been answering this one for years. In fact, it was a big Facebook thing that drove Amy crazy for a while. Ooh. So there have been huge cohort studies which show that people who take PPIs, especially for a long time, it's associated with a slightly higher risk of some dementias, including Alzheimer's. But first of all, it's an incredibly tiny absolute risk. It's one of those statistically significant, but probably not clinically significant things. Secondly, this is not a randomized controlled trial, and it may just be that people who take drugs are more likely to take drugs. So people who take lots of drugs either for their dementia or anything else also happen to take PPIs and everything else. But there's no causal link that's been established. And probably, again, people take PPIs often because they're having incredibly bad symptoms and other problems. You have to take them. All drugs come with risks.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Do the class of medications that I take for panic attacks, the benzodiazepines, do they have a higher risk of dementia, or do they have a higher risk of certain types of cancer?
I do not know of any risk to cancer.
Okay.
And again, this is one of those where there could be studies showing an association,
right?
But I wouldn't say they're causal. It could be the people that have certain mental illnesses or people that have certain issues also have a higher rate of dementia,
right?
And therefore, the use of benzodiazepines is linked. But there are no good studies I know of that show that the people who choose to use benzodiazepines are at higher risk than the people who do not.
Okay.
And again, this is one of those where I'd also say you got to measure out all the quality of life issues and everything else. And I think it's very likely that the benzodiazepines, if you're taking them, are increasing your quality of life and making it better. And that means something. And even if it came with a higher risk of something way, way, way in the future, that might be worth it.
Right. Yeah, no, there's an argument to be made. Unfortunately, I just feel a lot of anxiety about taking medications. But what's the next question?
Sure. David asks, how do you feel about Bayer advertising their aspirin as the wonder drug? I'm not nearly as offended by this as you might think. Because look, aspirin is one of those few drugs that probably we know works and works for a number of different things. I was talking to Stan before the show started that if you had to pick a drug that I think should be like the miracle drug, it's Afrin. And I get no money from Afrin, I swear to God. But if you've ever been congested and used Afrin, it's like 1 minute later, it is gone.
Right.
And like, granted, you can only use it for a couple days because you'll get rebound and everything else. But if you're looking for short-term resolution of symptoms, I don't think there's anything in the world that works like Afrin does.
Yeah, but aspirin is a pretty amazing drug, right? I mean, it really solves it. Well, it doesn't solve, but it reduces a lot of risks for a lot of different things. It also, of course, increases some risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you take aspirin every day?
If I was at high risk for heart attack and I thought it was going to reduce it, yes. But my risk is still so low that there's really no reason to at this point.
But we might find out, like, there's an association with lower colon cancer risk.
So if that was again, it's a good question. And especially since ulcerative colitis would raise my risk of colon cancer, that might be true. But that's reasonably well controlled at this point, and no one has actually. If my GI doctor said to, I probably would. Because I try very hard not to micromanage my own healthcare, which is an issue. Because I could get deep in the weeds. So I do things sometimes that I'm almost borderline going like, really? If my doctor tells me to. But you have to trust your doctor. All right. Michael Chin asks, how often can you smoke tobacco without experiencing long-term negative effects? Gah, I assume you're talking about cigarettes. There's no good stuff. I mean, come on. We're never going to have a randomized controlled trial where they get people to smoke different amounts every day to see how bad it gets long-term in the future. Cigarettes are bad. Like I felt like I sounded like Mackie off of South Park there, but they're just bad. Like there's just no good dose that I'd recommend. We've done a number of issues on even harm reduction by going to vaporizers as opposed to smoking tobacco. So I just can't, I don't have an answer for you. John, I don't know if you have a different take on this.
I mean, I quit smoking and I quit smoking all the way because I felt like smoking one cigarette a day for the rest of my life would slightly increase my risks and also kind of make me miserable for the rest of the day when I would be thinking about all the cigarettes I wanted to smoke. So I quit smoking in 2002. I smoked very compulsively throughout my years smoking, and I still regret not quitting sooner. And I would recommend that you seek ways to quit.
Yeah. All right. Elliot asks, is there any evidence that meditation is beneficial for people with ADHD with respect to attention and focus? Are different types of meditation more effective? This is one of those where, okay, look, bottom line, I bet there's no randomized controlled trial again. I bet there's no good study that proves, especially because how would you get a placebo for meditation? I mean, it'd be really, really hard. Having said that, as with everything, I always say, like, weigh the risks and the benefits. Look, meditation will cost you nothing. It helps a lot of people in a lot of different ways. I've even tried it and found it beneficial, and I wish sometimes I would find more time in my day to actually do that more often. In fact, I was just writing about this today. But again, it costs you nothing. So why not try it? If it works for you, great. And then you have another thing which probably has almost no harm associated with it, almost no cost associated with it, that provides you a benefit. And if you find it doesn't work, then so be it. You've just wasted a little bit of time and you can keep going. So I almost don't care that there's no research behind this. I'd say give it a shot. You might find benefit in your life even beyond the ADHD.
Yeah, I totally agree. The only other thing I'd say is that I personally found meditation helpful, but only after doing it for a while. So don't quit after 1 week. Kind of make my recommendation would be to make, a 10 or 15 minute a day commitment to yourself for at least a month.
You ever read Dan Harris's book, 10% Better?
No.
It's like it was the best analogy I've ever heard. He was like, and he's a big devotee of meditation, but he's like, look, it's not a miracle. It's not going to it'll make it 10% better. And I was like, if you really stick with it, I found that that's decent. Like right. You'll find some benefit likely if you really stick with it. And as John said, it'll take some time. Just be realistic going in, and I think you might be pleasantly surprised.
Right. People want miracle cures so bad. I among them, by the way, desperately want miracle cures. But what you actually find with a lot of, especially with chronic health problems, is you find 5 or 10% better.
All right, we'll do one more. Dr. Fistface asks, a gazillion ads say that there are new pills or supplements that radically and harmlessly cause the taker to lose weight. How many years away do you think we are away from finding such a miracle drug? Many. Yeah, it's like, look, first of all, none of those things you've heard are true. If they would, everyone would use it. And
Speed does. Doesn't speed help you lose weight?
Well, so does death, but
yeah.
It's like that's not going to help either.
Yeah, that's true. That's fair enough.
This is so I would, a miracle that you're going to like get this stuff. I think we're really, really far away. I do think, I bet someday they come up with something that, finds some way to increase metabolism to help people lose weight. But I think there's always going to be downsides and side effects and problems that come along with it. Again, everything, as John said before, everything's going to have trade-offs. The idea that we're going to find something harmless that does this with no downsides, I'm not real optimistic about that.
We have not found a lot of harmless medical interventions.
No.
Like we found a lot of medical interventions that are worth it, but not many that like don't come with any downsides.
No, because I think if we find stuff that comes with no downsides, we don't even call it medicine. We just do it. Like it's not
right. Like drinking water,
like exercise. Like, just why not? Like, moderate activity.
I would argue even exercise comes with some downsides. But yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the problems with weight loss is that and I've done a lot of things that are difficult in my life really hard. Like really, really hard. And it requires like a long-term, deep shift that's really hard to achieve, especially since there is at least some evidence that the body has a weight that it tries to get to, which goes up.
Oh God, yeah.
If your weight goes up.
Yeah. I lied. We'll do one more. A coworker eats a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and Veggie Tots for dinner every day and often goes days without drinking water. Are there any likely long-term harms you could mention that could help convince her to have a physical and talk with a doctor? I'm going to surprise you here, but why are you interfering so much in something that works for your coworker? I mean, look, if your coworker has found a nice steady state with the peanut butter sandwich for lunch and the Veggie Tots for dinner, who cares? Like, if that's working for him or her, I'm trying to see if you mentioned this, that you did not. Oh, you said her. If that works for her, great.
Wait, just to back up, are there meat tots? Like, aren't all tots veggie tots?
It's so good. I didn't even think about that.
It's so judgy. Like, this person is living a pretty high quality vegan diet as far as I can see. Veggie tots and peanut butter and bread.
Yeah.
That's all. It hits. Here's the thing.
Yeah.
And also on the subject of not drinking water, for a long time, people tried to avoid drinking water and if you were rich enough to not drink water, you literally never drank it. And those people lived to be 40 or at times even 45 years old.
Yep.
But also I would say, you can't interfere too much in someone else's life. I obviously, like, that's not an ideal diet, I guess. I would guess that's not perfect. It could use some more, I would argue it could use some more fruits and veggies.
This is where it's like I've tried to develop a little more humility about nutrition because I don't know what's in the Veggie Tots. Like if they're made of like a mixture of vegetables, so be it. If you don't have fruit, I don't even care.
If they're made of a mix, I'm figuring that they're made like all other tots with potatoes. Which, by the way, the average Irish laborer, Stan and I's favorite fact from Crash Course World History, the average male Irish laborer before the potato famine ate 10 pounds of potatoes per day.
Per day?
Per day.
I thought I was literally waiting for you to say month or year.
Per day.
Wow.
It was all they ate, and they ate a lot of it.
I'm not gonna. All right, I assume Veggie Tots meant like a vegetable medley turned into a tot.
Oh, in that case, I mean, that's better than my diet.
Right. I'm like, you're getting vegetables, you're getting protein. You're like, who am I to judge?
Actually, if there is such a Veggie Tot, I might go on this diet because I don't like water. So it's just Diet Dr. Pepper, peanut butter sandwiches, and Veggie Tots.
And I think it's very likely that for some people, that's a perfectly acceptable way to lead a healthy life. And I would not interfere. So no, I will not do your bidding and give you any things that would make her go have a physical and talk with her. Maybe she is getting a physical. How do you know if she's not getting medical help? Stop judging so much. That's what I would say. Anyway, thank you. First of all, thank you, John, for joining us for this podcast.
It's always so fun to hang out with you.
I really do appreciate it. Thank you all for listening. As always, if you could go to healthcaretriage.info and get your questions in, we may read them on the next podcast. I'm not even sure what the topic's going to be, but I guarantee you it's going to be awesome. Again, healthcaretriage.info. One more plug. As always, we're going to keep making this stuff no matter what happens. But, patreon.com is a great way for you to support the show. If you go to patreon.com/healthcaretriage, Donate as little as $1 a month and we're going to be thrilled. It helps make the show bigger and better. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.